Ghazwa-e-Hind will happen. My people will fight in Ghazwa-e-Hind, and those who will fight in Ghazwa-e-Hind will be victorious, and they will come back to find that the Messiah, Isa alayhi salam, has descended. The Holy Prophet ﷺ saw a very strong link between Al-Hind and the second advent of Hazrat Isa alayhi salam. And he asked them to assemble where? At a point called Jabal-e-Hindi. He says, I feel a very fragrant, cool breeze coming to me from Al-Hind. Because he's coming to revive Islam, means that he will represent the Holy Prophet ﷺ in this Ghazwa-e-Hind. The Messiah and India, the connection is very strongly there.
Asad, it's great to have you on the Al-Hakam podcast again.
Good to be back, Jazakumullah.
Recently you published in Al-Hakam a very interesting research piece which was on a topic which isn't usually talked about, and that was India and its connection with not only pre-Islamic Arabia but also Islamic Arabia. And it's quite detailed. And just from the beginning, you don't really think about India and the history of Islam in Arabia. So how did this all come about?
Well, I was working on a topic which has nothing to do with India or the connection or anything like that. I was actually doing something. I wanted to understand the root of the Holy Prophet ﷺ at the conquest of Mecca. And I was getting varying accounts. I was just trying to iron it out to see what exactly it was. Names have changed and whatnot, so it was really difficult to get that straight. When I actually finally did, or I think I did, what historians would agree upon is that when he entered Makkah, he entered it from the north part, because whenever he came from Medina after that, he would always enter from the northern passage called the Qada. And would walk, and he, with his army of 10,000 men, walked through. He split it into 4 battalions, and then told them to meet him at a point from where they would where they would assemble, and then they would finally descend into the Wadi-e-Ibrahim, i.e. Mecca, or around the Kaaba.
This is the conquest of Mecca.
This is the conquest of Mecca. So the 4 battalions go out, and he asked them to assemble where? At a point called Jabal-e-Hindi. So that was very intriguing for me, that I never knew there was a Jabal-e-Hindi, but then I was intrigued, maybe because of my connection to the Indian subcontinent. I mean, I'm from Pakistan, and we must remember, I must clarify, whatever we're going to talk about, all the mention of India is not the Republic of India.
Modern day.
It's not that. It's about the region called Al-Hind, before the time of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, the pre-Islamic Arabia, and even in the time of the Holy Prophet ﷺ.
So Rasulullah ﷺ, they all meet at this mountain. How would you translate? Mountain of India.
It's the name. The name is Jabal-e-Hindi. That is how it has always been known. It's a long range of Jabal-e-Khan, as they call it. And then it's little parts of it named. So the last mount which is very close to the Kaaba, is Jabal-e-Hindi. So that is where they assembled, and that is how they made their way into.
Okay, so then you looked further into the connection of India and Arabia?
India and Arabia. Why was it called Jabal-e-Hindi?
Right, okay.
That was were they aware of even this name? What did they know about India, etc., etc.?
So what did you find?
I found that they'd known India. The people of Arabia were very well acquainted with India many, many hundred years before the advent of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. You go back into the before the Common Era, hundreds of years, right? At the time of the Indus Valley civilization and the Mesopotamian civilization, and you find the trade connections there, and all historians confirm that. And the route for all that time had most of the times remained through, especially when they took it through the sea, it was traveling from India, because the western coast of India and the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula, the tip of it, which we now know as Oman, they're in a straight line to each other. And trade travel through sea had always been there. So they would reach Arabia, the southern part of Arabia, which is Oman, Yemen, Hadramaut, etc., Aden, etc. So they would get there, Indian traders, and from there on, the Arab merchants would buy goods off them and then take them all the way from the south to the north through Hijaz. So it was a trade route, Everybody knows that. I mean, yes,
Exactly.
people like Patricia Crone, can agree as much as they like, but then she had a very hard and fast agenda to serve. But it has always existed.
That's interesting.
It's even called the incense route.
Right.
And it went from the south through Hijaz, which is like Makkah, Medina, etc., all the way to Syria, because that is where they were actually aimed for.
Yeah.
They had to be traded into modern day Europe or the Byzantine Empire.
Right, exactly. And Bilad al-Sham and all that area. And I think people who have studied the Sira also, they're well aware of the trade route between Makkah and Medina.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that comes as part of Sira, right? That
Yeah.
comes as part of the history of the Prophet ﷺ. But not many people know that actually a lot of the traders will come from India.
Yes, and not many people maybe think what was it that was coming from India.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good question.
It must have been a very profitable kind of trade that was going on for such commerce relationships to have existed from before the Common Era and over those centuries. So it's called the route that we've just spoken about, from Yemen, Oman, all the way up north up to Syria, and then from Syria into modern day Europe.
Yeah.
It still is known as the incense route.
Yeah.
So that is a hint towards what actually was coming from India. You had spices coming from India, and that was the major supply that would come from India. You had fragrances coming from, or frankincense as they call them, coming from India, like oud, like mushk, or musk as we know it, right? And then in spices, you had such spices coming in which were slightly Arabicized, but were very well known according to the Indian names or the Sanskrit names. Like zanjabil, even the Quran mentions it, is a slightly Arabicized version of the Sanskrit word for ginger.
Interesting.
Right? Then you have, the Quran mentions kafur, which is camphor. That too was, the main supply came from India. So all of these spices, like cloves, like filfil as they call it, or pepper, and many of the spices, they were coming all the way from India into Arabia. And the most important item that came from India was the Indian sword. Saf-e-Hindi, as they would call it.
And that's
the
important.
Arabs.
That's important because the Arabs were fighting a lot.
Because Arabs were fighting a lot. They thrived on that fighting and warfare. And they just loved the Saf-e-Hindi or Muhannad as they called it, or Hindwani as they called it. They loved it. They praised it.
So this is
even in their poetry. Even from the Jahiliyyah days. They would say, for this discussion, I won't go into references, but I'm sure you'll be able to get them from the article and show them on the screen.
And if anyone wants to go deeper, they can, of course, read it. Yeah.
So they would mention how strong the Saf Hindi was, how unique the Saf Hindi was, how a single strike could actually just kill a person,
right?
How a single strike could not let a whole army bounce back, right? So it was loved by them.
Okay. So there's a special kind of Indian sword, which is very well recognized in the Arabian Peninsula by the Arabs.
Absolutely, from pre-Islamic times.
Okay. Okay. Right? Yeah.
Now, even just before we go on, the Jabal-e-Hindi, because it took me a lot of time and effort to actually go in to see why it was called that. And then, what I could find was very interesting. Is that, when even before the time of Qusay, who was the founder, not the founder, but like the first well-known leader of the Quraysh that we know of, even before his time, which means hundreds of years before the birth of the Holy Prophet, when Jurhum, the tribe Jurhum, ruled over Mecca, the Katura tribe came to take over. They had a fight, they had a war, or a battle if you like. And during that battle, the Indian swords were hidden in a mountain, a little hill of Mount Qayqan. Hence, it got to be known, by those Indian swords being hidden in there,
right?
It got to be known as Jabal-e-Hindi.
Okay, that's interesting.
So the sword from India, Saf Hindi, was the most, I would say, important merchandise being traded from India to Arabia.
So you've got this incense route, the trade route, all these kind of products coming in, like you were speaking about, the spices, the oud, and we talk about Arabian oud, but a lot of that is coming from this whole Al-Hind area.
Absolutely.
You speak about the swords, Jabal Hindi. How about, and there's one section in your article about the actual Indians or people from that area living in the Arabian Peninsula, so the settlers who are there.
Absolutely. You see, the interesting thing is that when these Indian traders were coming, it wasn't like they were coming in a lorry from, say, Belgium to the United Kingdom, dropping off their stuff at Lidl and then heading back. It would take them months over months to arrive through the sea or whatever other route was used. They would come here, they would stay here before they headed back. While they stayed here, most of them, mingled with other indigenous members of the community there, and they married, and they had children, and they settled. So we know that Indian people of Indian origin, were very much living in parts of the Indian peninsula, especially the southern coast, Yemen and Oman again, the Persian/Arabian Gulf. Along that, they had their settlements there. The people say, the Zutt, as they were called, were of Indian origin. They were the Jats or the Jats, as you call them. But for the absence of the te in Arabic language, they were known as Zutt.
That's interesting.
So it turned into that. And it's, by the way, if you look into any of the etymology of the term or the word Zutt, Ibn Manzoor in Lisanul Arab, Abul Fida in his Taqwimul Buldan, he also mentions it. He says, and all of them, they go into the detail. It's confirmed by every source that the Zutt were actually the Jat people whose homeland was the Balochistan, the Makran part, or that part of the coast of India, and beyond that all the way up to Multan.
Wow, that's so interesting.
And so there were so many communities. They were known not only in pre-Islamic Arabia, they were also known by the Holy Prophet ﷺ. He knew them as Zutt, the Zutt people.
And these are the Jats.
These are the Jats. He knew them so well that after his experience of Miraj and Isra, he described Prophet Moses as his appearance being like that of the people of Zutt.
That's so interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
So as Jats or Indian looks, Indian features. Then you have, he sent Khalid bin al-Walid to Najran to take the message of Islam to the Christians of Najran. He went there. A part of their community accepted Islam, and a delegation came from Najran. They came to the Holy Prophet ﷺ with Khalid bin al-Walid. And as soon as he looked at them, he asked Khalid bin al-Walid, who are these people who look like the Zutt or the Jats or Indians or of Indian origin?
So the Prophet ﷺ was very much
aware of them. So I mean, they were very much around. They were very much known. Even Abdullah bin Masud's tradition, Raziyallahu anhu's tradition, about the visit of the jinns and how the Holy Prophet ﷺ met them. It's a long one, so we can't go into that with this little time at hand. But he described that. He said, Rasulullah ﷺ told me not to stay confined in a certain part of the mountains, not to come out of it. Even if they come to you, don't talk to them. The jinns approached me. They tried to talk to me. I didn't talk back. I didn't reply. But when I looked at them, and they looked like the Zutt people, the Indian people. So the Holy Prophet ﷺ knew people of Indian origin, what they looked like. He was a consumer of the Indian products. The swords that were inherited later on by Abdul Muttalib, the grandfather of the Holy Prophet. Part of them were, obviously, a lot of them were Indian swords, etc. So he'd known Indian people, Indian products, Indian swords.
You also mentioned them being named as Rijal-e-Sindh.
Rijal-e-Sindh, because a Sindh and Al-Hind were most of the times interchangeably used.
Right, okay.
So it's because of this trade going on, and it was a two-way trade. So the Arabs who had gone there, they had discovered a part which they knew as Sindh, and they thought that this is the gateway to Al-Hind.
Okay, so
the two terms have been interchangeably being used.
Obviously, if there's Indians there, they're very much they're living there. So, of course, you've got their traditions, their looks, everything which is mentioned, then obviously, and this is a section within your article, there has to be an element of religion.
Yes.
And when we think of India and go back into history, everyone thinks of Hinduism.
Of course. Now you see these traders coming from India.
Yeah.
It took them months to get to Arabia. They stayed here for weeks, months, and those who had actually mingled and kind of married in those races, the Arabian races, they stayed there. They had their families there.
Yeah.
But coming over and being here in transit for several months, we know from archaeological finds that they would bring their gods along, their idols.
The idols, yeah.
Right?
As was the practice at the time.
As was the practice at that time. So they would carry them, bring them along. And the travel between, the incense route,
Yeah.
Mecca is what housed the Kaaba, which was a sanctuary, and where were placed, as everyone knows, all sorts of idols.
Yeah.
Right? And all sorts of religions would come there to, to perform their rituals around their gods, and then make their way up Syria.
Towards Syria.
Right? We haven't come across any excavations from Mecca or around Mecca yet, but on the fringes of Arabia, the excavations, we know that we've got idols or their impressions in those excavations, even from like 200 years before the birth of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
They've been found
from Iraq, from the borders of Saudi Arabia, the modern day Saudi Arabia. The gods that we all know, the Holy Quran speaks of them: Allat, Manat, and Uzza.
Yeah.
So whenever they're portrayed like Indian goddesses. They're wearing saris. You find them in a posture which is very much like an Indian goddess.
Yeah.
They're very much Indian looking. Manat has a lion under her feet, or she's standing over it or sitting over it, and with the right hand raised like that, as you know. So there is clear indications of the Hindu religion's presence or some kind of influence on Arabia. But we can't just live with indications. Yeah. We have to slightly look more into how much of that religion was existing, or Indian religion, or Al-Hind's religion was existing there. We find in the Holy Quran the mention of, when it comes to Ahl Kitab, we find in Al-Lazina Amanu, which is the believers, Wal-Lazina Hadu, the Jews, Wal-Nasara, was Sabiin, Christians and Sabiin. Sabiin, or the Sabians, have always riddled the Mufassirin.
They've always confused. Yeah, everyone's got a different interpretation.
Whether this, whether that, there could be this, there could be that.
Yeah.
Right? But we need to look at it from another angle. The Holy Quran mentions them as Ahl Kitab.
Right.
Right? And then the Holy Quran also mentions 4 Sharias, 4 books of religious law. Shara lakum min ad-deen, addressing the Holy Prophet ﷺ, we have revealed for you the law. Shara lakum min ad-deen ma wasa bihi Nuhan, that we revealed for Nuh, and for Abraham, and for Moses, and for Jesus. So clearly we now have 4 types of Ahl Kitab clearly mentioned by the Holy Quran.
Yeah.
We have 4 religious laws clearly mentioned by the Ya ayyuhallazina amanu, clearly those who believe in the Holy Quran. Wallazina hadu, those who believe in the Prophet Moses. Wan Nasara, those who believe in Prophet Jesus.
Yeah.
Sabiin, you're only left with Nuh and Abraham. So the Sabians predated all of these monotheistic religions. They definitely had a monotheistic origin. And we have ample proof from writers and explorers and historians and geographers like Al-Shahrastani and all of these other people. Even the West agrees that the Sabians, the way they split, some of them you would find them going towards the Byzantines, going to Syria, going to wherever on the north. Some of them going towards from Mesopotamia, which is the origin of Abrahamic religion, of Hazrat Abraham actually, all the way into India.
So they took this religion.
To India.
Okay.
And it stayed there for a long time. Came back with certain influences. You find so many similarities there, like Abraham and Brahma.
Yeah, tell us more about that, Brahma and Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam.
So,
that connection.
Because that is where in Hindu religion traces its roots and its origins. And then in Brahma,
right,
the divine supreme force that is driving everything, right? It's a long detail that we can't actually go into. But then, if you look at Rig Veda, one of their important Vedas, and if you look at the Old Testament, you find so many similarities, Brahma, and then you have Abraham in the Old Testament, as Ibrahim is named there. Abraham's wife was Sarah. Brahma, in the Hindu religion, you find them, it was Saraswati. She was pretty. This is all from the Old Testament and the Rig Veda, etc., etc. One of the grandsons of Brahma is sacrificed in the way of the Lord, but then afterwards is reincarnated in the form of a ram.
Right.
Abraham's alayhi salam's son is about to be sacrificed, but saved by the appearance of a ram.
Yeah.
So all of that. So there is clear proof of how the origins of Hindu religion are monotheistic. Even Hindus accept that, right? And then from there on, like all other ancient religions have changed form, they went through so much of time. I mean, because Hinduism isn't like you would know better than me. It's not like a strictly defined religion.
Yeah, there's so many different branches.
There's so many different branches of it. It's they say it's more of a way of life.
Yeah.
There is heavy influence of Buddhism as well.
There is, yeah.
And Buddhism, Mahatma Buddha was born in a place called Kipil. Now again, the Arabicized version of Kipil is Kifl. And you find the mention of Dhul Kifl in the Holy Quran.
Yeah.
Which points to the fact that there is mention even of Eastern religions or founders of Eastern religion, for example, Mahatma Buddha.
Yeah, in the Holy Quran.
In the Holy Quran. So that religion, its presence in the Holy Kaaba, those idols that were sitting there and being worshipped, they had Indian idols in them, or idols of Hindus that were visiting as traders or in whatever capacity. But we know we have clear, ample proof, and I would insist again here that anyone interested should go and read the article, the link of which I'm sure you would show during the podcast.
We'll put it in the show note captions as well. And that makes a lot of sense as well, because if you think about it, Hinduism is one of, or if not the oldest religions that we know of today, which a lot are following. And of course, if they're trading with that whole route going through the Arabian Peninsula up towards Bilad al-Sham, then of course they're going to be bringing their religious items and the idols as well.
Absolutely.
And it's the reason I'm saying it's interesting is because when we think of the idols in the Kaaba, I think just automatically everyone thinks, okay, these were just the Arab idols or the idols of the tribes around Mecca, but Makkah was that trade route hub as well.
It was, definitely.
You have that connection.
Of course. And then, usually we just brush it off by saying pagans.
Yeah.
Sometimes we translate them as mushrikun. Sometimes we translate them as kuffar.
Yeah.
But you see, associating with God means you can't just call them polytheists. It doesn't translate the word mushrikun, because mushrik means someone who associates other deities with the Supreme God.
Yeah.
So it means they believe in a God.
They do, exactly.
And then they have other deities associated to them. This is exactly the case with Hinduism and related religions. There is a supreme being, and then there are other forms of deities which they believe lead to the one God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, why should this matter to Muslims, the connection between India or Al-Hind and Muslims? And this is the concluding part of your article where you speak about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his references about Al-Hind and all of that kind of final day eschatology, if you like.
That is what makes it important.
Exactly.
For that presence of
I
Al-Hind.
think the history side is really interesting as well, but for a Muslim there's a lot more. Right?
Absolutely. Because the Holy Prophet we know was aware of Al-Hind very much. He was aware of the mercantile trade that had taken place. He was from the family who had always remained a consumer of the products. He was himself a consumer of Indian products. a woman goes to him telling, my son is ill and needs treatment and I don't know what to do. He says, oh, use Oud Hindi.
Yeah.
And all of these spices were called Oud Hindi, Tamir Hindi, Oud Hindi, and the Mushrik Hindi, Kafur Hindi, etc., etc., all of them. That Hindi stamp always had to be there. So he was very much aware of that. Now, with this incense root, the interesting thing is that in Islamic eschatology, we have an element of incense associated to India or Al-Hind. Again, we're not talking of the Republic of India.
Yeah.
By the Holy Prophet ﷺ, when he says, I feel a very fragrant, cool breeze coming to me from Al-Hind. Right?
Yeah.
What was that cool breeze? Because that shows an element of satisfaction, an element of happiness, an element of pleasure. What was that pleasure that the Holy Prophet ﷺ would get from Al-Hind? Unfortunately, in the current Pakistan-India conflict, Pakistani scholars especially have just tried to eradicate and wipe and erase this hadith by discrediting it, by doing whatever they can. I mean, you look at the great scholars, the so-called great scholars, all of them in inverted commas, twisting the word and saying, oh, the Holy Prophet ﷺ said, I feel a cool breeze coming to me from the east. They're just changing the wording, right? He clearly said from Al-Hind. So because Pakistan sees it, oh no, it can't be from India, it can't be from, no, for God's sake, I mean, the Holy Prophet ﷺ, don't limit his words.
Yeah.
By Al-Hind, the Holy Prophet ﷺ meant the region or the part of land.
He meant Pakistan area as well.
Right? So don't deprive yourself of that,
exactly.
So, I mean, for us, we as Ahmadis, we would never look at it in any political, against any political
just
backdrop.
pick and choose,
It's like, it's the region that the Holy Prophet ﷺ is referring to, and Pakistan and Bangladesh, they're all part of it, right? So as Muslims, we should look at it like that. So from that region, right? Now, what is that cool breeze? That's very promising. The Holy Prophet ﷺ says that. And then he also goes on to talk about a Ghazwa-e-Hind.
Yeah. Ghazwa-e-Hind, very famous.
Very famous, right?
Yeah.
Now, all the way from Ibn Kathir and even people before him, some said, Ibn Kathir said that he thought that had happened by the conquest of India when it happened at the hands of Muhammad bin Qasim in 710-12 CE. So that has happened. That cannot be the case. It's Ghazwa.
Yeah.
Ghazwa, by definition, by any definition, Islamic definition, has to have the participation of the Holy Prophet ﷺ in it. So Muhammad bin Qasim, just because his name was Muhammad, doesn't make him Muhammad, the Holy Prophet.
Because the opposite would be Sharia.
Yes,
where the Holy Prophet didn't come.
Yeah, that's Islamic terminology, right? So that is properly well defined by any definition, by any standard. Ghazwa will have to have the Holy Prophet ﷺ. Later on, some tried to present it as, such and such war between India and Pakistan was Ghazwa-e-Hind. Come on.
Yeah, exactly.
And then some of them, Pakistan clearly, you can't even claim victory. So, but we don't go into that political detail. So, by definition, the Holy Prophet ﷺ has to be there. How can the Holy Prophet ﷺ be there? Now, this set of Ghazwa-e-Hind, or this collection of Ghazwa-e-Hind ahadith, there are 2-3, you can say, they're derivatives or they're variants, if you like. In one, the Holy Prophet ﷺ says, there will be a Ghazwa-e-Hind, if I survive to that time, if I take part, if I am killed, I will be a martyr. If I come back, I will be like Abu Huraira.
Yeah.
Right? Another one says that there will be 2 people from my ummah that will be saved from hellfire. One who take part in Ghazwa-e-Hind, the other who are with Isa ibn Maryam.
So he's connected the two.
He's connected it to the second advent of Isa ibn Maryam, or the Messiah of the latter days. So how clearly
it's clear.
The link is there. So that means the advent of the Messiah of the latter days. The Holy Prophet ﷺ very clearly saw its connection to Al-Hind.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? There is another one, the third variant. Ghazwa-e-Hind will happen. My people will fight in Ghazwa-e-Hind. And those who will fight in Ghazwa-e-Hind, will succeed, will be victorious, and they will come back to Syria, to Sham, to find that the Messiah, Isa alayhi salam, has descended.
Yeah.
A reward. So that in all three variants,
The Messiah.
the Messiah and and India, the connection is very strongly there.
What would you say to people who say all of these references that you have mentioned, because I know you do address this, are weak and they're not, we can't accept them?
I would say that
Because
I mean, it really
and
depends.
the first thing, are you the only I mean, has there been other Muslim scholars, Muslims who have used this in their literature?
I wouldn't dare do that.
Yeah.
You know? I have absolutely no credentials to be interpreting or reinterpreting something. I'm only just telling what Muslim scholars have done in the past, all along, up until the time when that line was drawn and India was divided into Pakistan and Bangladesh, and into Pakistan and India and Bangladesh. Pakistan and India have always been, at war for a very long time. There have been political conflicts and whatnot, geopolitical conflicts and whatnot. So that has always been there, right? Ever since that time, they've tried to get rid of these ahadiths. But if Shah Waliullah Muhaddis Dehlvi found how can you, just because it's in Mustadrak, you'll have to get rid of the whole of Mustadrak, right? Yeah. And just because it's in Mujam al-Awst, you'll have to get rid of the whole of the Mujam al-Awst by Tabarani, right? So you have to be very careful.
Yeah. What were you saying about Shah Waliullah Muhaddis?
Shah Waliullah Muhaddis Dehlvi used the Ghazwa-e-Hind and the Cool Breeze hadith in favor of the revival movement or the revivalist movement that he had started.
So he's accepting
it for his polemical discourse. Iqbal, Hazrat, Allama, Muhammad, Iqbal, Rahmatullah Alayh. One of his couplets, one of his verses, Mere Arab ko aayi, taza hawa jahan se, mera watan wahi hai, mera watan wahi hai. So Iqbal, sometimes they rate him even more than hadith literature. So there you go. How can you get rid of it? You can't.
He clearly referenced
hadith and others, like I said, Ghazwa-e-Hind.
So this is people, reputable Muslims have used these hadith.
Of course they have. And why not?
So in all of this, and again, I refer people to the article, which is on Al-Hakam. We'll put it in the show note captions. What is the conclusion?
The conclusion, I don't, like I said, I've said that in the article.
I know, you left it
I don't want to impose any conclusions on anyone.
But what's your conclusion?
My conclusion is there is a very strong link. The Holy Prophet ﷺ saw a very strong link between Al-Hind and the second advent of the Messiah of the latter days, of Hazrat Isa alayhi salam. Ghazwa had to be, either he had to be a part of it himself, the Holy Prophet. He wasn't. We all know that. But then no one can be at the stature, at the position of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of course. So someone who would come to revive the Sharia, revive it, not bring a new one that the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had brought, who will be his representative, as we know from many ahadith that he sees the revival of Islam through the promised Messiah, revival of Islam being a new start, a new life for Islam. So the second advent of Isa alayhi salam is important. Al-Hind is important. Jabal-e-Hind is important because that is where, at the victory of the conquest of Makkah, at that point he descends from Jabal-e-Hindi. He chooses Jabal-e-Hindi to get into Wadi Ibrahim, i.e. Makkah, toward the Kaaba. That is important. In my opinion, if that matters, it's all connected. It's very clear that it's very clearly connected. Al-Hind and the second advent of Hazrat Isa ibn Maryam alayhi salam, which was, as we say, the promised Messiah of the latter days, they're very strongly connected. They need to be looked into. They need to be understood. Ghazwa either will have to have the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which we clearly know that he didn't take part in that. But the second advent of Isa ibn Maryam alayhi salam, because he's coming to revive Islam, means that he will represent the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in this Ghazwa-e-Hind. And that Ghazwa-e-Hind means, again, you see, because all of that religion, which a monotheist religion which goes into areas, various areas, comes back with various beliefs added to it. Right or wrong, we're not going into that debate. Just as the Holy Prophet ﷺ cleansed the Kaaba from any type of idols, so will the promised Messiah of the latter days come and cleanse Islam and the heart of Islam. He will enter, not physically maybe into Kaaba, but into the heartland or the heart of Islam, and cleanse it from any idols that may be there.
Thank you so much, Jazakumullah. And anyone who wants to read the article, they can go to alhakam.org and find it. It's in the show note captions.
Thank you very much.